everyone, it's Caroline. If you can see my dirty kitchen in the back, no, you can't. I'm sitting down to film this before I talk myself out of it. Happy New Year, by the way. Happy 2023. I'm actually here to talk to you today about my favorite things that I read in 2022. Now, if you were here in 2021, you'll know that my year of reading was just awful, so terrible. I'm so happy to report that last year in 2022, it went so much significantly, astronomically better. I had such a good reading year last year, and I want to tell you about my favorite things that I read, particularly my top 6 plus 1. So 7, my top 7 books that I read. The reason that I say plus 1, I guess I'm just starting now. It's a short story collection, and I've wanted to include short story collections in my top books of the year in the past, but just for whatever reason, I held myself back, and I'm not doing that anymore. So I'm gonna start with the short story collection. It's I Hold a Wolf by the Ears by Lauren Vandenberg. This is a collection of short stories that don't really have anything to do with one another. There's no similar settings or like characters. They're all kind of speculative, spooky, horror leaning stories that I just could not get enough of. Lauren Vandenberg accomplished with every single story, she managed to write something where I simultaneously did not want the story to end. I wanted every single one of these to be like a full-length novel, but also at the same time, I just found every single ending so satisfactory. It focuses on themes of I guess like misogyny and violence against... Are you kidding? Who is calling me? It was a delivery that I didn't even know was scheduled to happen. Okay, where was I? The stories as a whole focus on, I guess, just what it means to be a woman living in today's time. And it focuses on the trauma of that, but also the, I don't know, just the weird situations that can happen with that as well. And this is why I love short story collections, because now I know that Lauren Vandenberg is someone that I want to pick up a full-length novel from this year in 2023. Now we're gonna move on to like my official top 6, even though this was a part of my, I guess let's just call it a top 7. This was my number 7 most favorite book of 2022, and now we're gonna move on up. I almost just said that from here on out, they were all gonna be like full-length novels, but that's not the case, I'm realizing now. With this next one though, my number 6 one, it is Ring Shout by P. Djeli Clark. So this was one that I saw a lot on everyone's 2021 favorites of the year list, and I'm pretty sure that if I would have been smart and picked it up in 2021, it would have been on my top favorites list then, but I waited around until this year, and I am so glad that I picked this up. It's very out of my comfort zone. It's a horror novella. It takes place kind of in an alternate history of the US, right around the time where the KKK is really beginning to take root, only in this version of history, there are members of the KKK that are literal demons, like with teeth and claws, and we are focusing on a trio of Black women who literally hunt down and kill these KKK monster demons. Reading this was just such a cinematic experience. P. Djeli Clark is a genius with the way that he writes and crafts these kind of like chase scenes and then observation scenes, and then later on in the story we sort of get these sort of dreamscape sequences as well, and I just found the entire reading experience so immersive. I always have to commend authors that are able to craft these engaging and like I said, cinematic books that are also tackling really tough topics like white supremacy and kind of like the white lens on Black trauma, and the book just had really amazing things to say, and yet was also just like such an engaging and like wild ride of a story to read. I loved all of the characters that we were focusing on, and I'm really grateful to this book, and then also this book kind of too, for opening me up to horror a little bit more. Reading those two books made me realize that horror is a genre that I can actually enjoy and want to like explore a little bit more in this year of 2023. For my number 5 book, let's talk about Me Moth by Amber McBride. This is a young adult novel in verse, and we're focusing on our main character, Moth, who is dealing with a lot of trauma and grief as she has been through a car accident where she is the sole remaining member of her immediate family. So predictably, she's going through a lot of traumatic things and trying to cope and figure out who she is after that amount of loss. The story kind of takes off where a new boy named Santi moves to her school and they meet each other and kind of start to form a relationship. They go on a road trip together, and it's really just about them discovering different things about themselves through one another. And let me tell you about the writing in this book. I read it originally on my Kindle, and I just remember sitting there with slow, steady tears streaming down my face because the writing was just that intensely gorgeous. I remember getting to the end of one page and being like, okay, well, the next page can't possibly be more heartbreaking, more breathtakingly beautiful than that one. And then I would flip. And of course, it was. And that's how it was the entire way through the book. I don't find myself, I like don't annotate books, but with this one, I had to get a physical copy because this was just one that so many lines resonated and so many lines were just like, how did the author think to write that? I have no idea. Every single time I think that I'm done with young adult, I'll read something like this that's like, Caroline, you're not done with young adult. Like, if you said that, then you wouldn't have picked up this, and I would have been absent of the number 5 favorite book of 2022. Moving on to book number 4 is another one that I think showed up on a lot of people's 2021 top lists of the year. So again, I should have listened, but again, I'll take it, picking it up in 2022. It's The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. If you don't know what this is, it's a collection of essays written by John Green, and the whole idea of it, I mean, review is in the title, but this is something that I didn't realize until I actually started reading it. He's reviewing like different objects, concepts, like historical events, paintings, just a bunch of different things in this book. I feel like I'm not conveying myself well. John Green actually got his start in book reviewing, so he would be the one that was like writing the blurbs for books. So he essentially takes that idea, but instead of applying it to books, he just applies it to a whole bunch of different things. The essays really range from like personal to informational. There's a lot of history that's included in this and a lot of research that had to go into these essays. And then you get some of that just like John Green tone and like lessons in a lot of them. I was just personally so happy to be back in John Green's, like reading John Green's writing again, like I did when I was reading his young adult books when I was a young adult. And I think that the way that he presents his ideas, it's just really poignant and thoughtful and doesn't like lean into being gratuitous or cliche. I do recommend, don't read these all in one sitting. I read this entire book over the course of like a month, and I would just read a couple of essays each day. And I feel like that's what made me love it even more. There's still lines from this book that like cycle through my head on a loop, and I'm just so happy that I read this book, and it's one that I'm definitely going to come back to in the future, and it would be easy to come back to because you can just flip to any essay and read it when you need it. Okay, we're down to our top 3. Up to our top 3, I'm not quite sure. But in the number 3 spot, let's talk about The Year We Fell from Space by Amy Sarah King, who also publishes under A.S. King when she writes YA, but this was a middle grade book about our main character. It's told through the perspective of a middle grade aged girl whose father has recently moved out of their house. She's watching her parents separate and then eventually divorcing. And we come to find out as the audience, her father is suffering from clinical like diagnosed depression. And it's about her coping with learning all of these things and kind of just discovering who she is without her dad and without a whole family, I guess. I'm convinced that no one can write the inside mind of a teenager or a middle grade child the way that A.S. King can. She just puts her thumb down on so many thoughts and feelings that I think are so relevant. She writes flawed and real and messy kids, as well as flawed and real messy adults, which I think is so important for young people and not young people to be reading. She also manages to put a little bit of Amy Sarah King speculative magic in there. At one point during the story, our main character, who is obsessed with the stars and like mapping out constellations, sees a rock fall from the sky outside of her house, and she actually goes to the rock and takes the rock inside of her bedroom, and she talks to the rock, and the rock ends up talking back to her. And just the conversations that she has with that rock are so vulnerable and were so emotionally raw, and I saw myself as an adult in the questions that this young girl was asking to this rock. I wrote down in my notebook that I want to read my Goodreads review to you, so let me go get my phone really quick. How do I find my review? Oh, okay. So in my review, I wrote word for word. This isn't much of a review, but I feel like it's important that I say it. I said, for the girls talking to rocks and mapping the stars and desperately trying to understand why people leave, I see you. A.S. King sees you. Liberty, the main character of this book, will see you, and I loved it. Okay, my number 2 top book of 2022 was such a shock to me, I guess. Because I had never even heard of it before 2022. And I haven't seen anyone else talk about it besides my friend Wendy, who was the one that suggested that I pick it up. And Wendy, I am so grateful to you for suggesting The Anomaly by Hervé Letellier. He's French, my French is bad. This is actually a book that's translated from French, and I was so close to not including this book on the list. Not because, I mean, it's my number 2 favorite book of the year, but I think that this book is so much better if you don't know anything about it. So I can't tell you a whole lot about it. I went into it knowing absolutely nothing, and for the first 100 or so pages, that remained the case. I knew absolutely nothing. I had no idea what was going on, and I was so gripped to the point that I could not put the book down. The book does kind of tout itself as an existential thriller, and I feel like that's a good genre descriptor. We are focusing on so many different perspectives, and for the first 100 or so pages, you are kind of just learning how those perspectives are connected, and then once you find out how and why they're all connected, it's like the book completely flips on itself, and then it does that about like 17 more times before you actually get to the end of the book, in which case it flips on itself again. I think that the reason that I loved this so much was because I've never read anything quite like it before. It's almost like we got a billion different character studies rolled into one, but then also a genre bending book. It's almost like just all of my favorite things about books are in here. This book is also so intensely self-aware, to the point that there were points when I was reading it, and it's almost like there was certain lines that the author put in there that when I read them, it felt like the book itself was like, hey, you, yes, you reading this right now, I know you're reading this. I know you're reading this exact line right now. And there was something so personal about that. I think this book is also just a masterclass in how to perfectly layer multiple POVs, and other authors would do well to take note. Anyways, that's all I really feel comfortable telling you about this book, and I can't imagine the day that I don't think about this book. I read it back in like June, and I've thought about it every single day since, and I don't see that stopping anytime soon. And here we are, we've made it to my number 1 favorite book that I read in 2022. If I talk to you about what I read a lot, or if you pay attention to to like what I post on Instagram a lot, then you already know this. But if you don't, my #1 favorite book of 2022 is A Snake Falls to Earth by Darcy Little Badger. This is a young adult story, although I could see it branching into middle grade, but I think that it's well put in young adult just because the pacing of it, I think that maybe more mature young adult readers would just appreciate the story more. We have two perspectives that we're following in here. One of them is Nina, who is a young Apache girl, and then the other one, his name is Ollie, who is a cottonmouth kid. So he is a cottonmouth snake that also has the ability to transform into a young boy. They exist in two kind of parallel realities. Nina's reality is similar to ours, although there are some like dystopian elements to her setting. Ollie lives in this world full of other creatures that can also kind of shapeshift from human into animal. And we're following each of their narratives as they wind closer and closer together, and then they eventually meet, and their lives, both of them are trying to accomplish things that they need one another's help with. I think the biggest reason why this had such an impact on me was that reading this reminded me of the sense of joy that reading would bring me when I was younger. And I think a big reason for that is that this is just a pure kind of adventure story that focuses on friendship. I typically am a reader that loves to be emotionally devastated by books, and there was nothing that emotionally devastating in here besides the way, I mean, this isn't emotionally devastating, but just something that I appreciated so much about the story was the way that it was told. It kind of broke from the typical storytelling mold, and I think Darcy Little Badger just did such a great job at interweaving these two storylines kind of in a way that there's not necessarily like a rise and fall like a typical plot, but it's more kind of a full circle plot line. The characters in here would do anything to help and save one another, and I got so attached to so many of the characters that are featured in here. Darcy Little Badger's writing was just so completely immersive that not only did I love the book, but I loved my reading experience that went along with the book as well. That concludes my favorite books that I read in 2022. I am so grateful for the year of reading that I had. I am so grateful for the way that my year of reading in 2023, the year that we're currently in, is starting off. Hope that wherever you are, you're having a fantastic day. I hope that you had wonderful things that you read this year, and I hope that your 2023 year of reading is starting off great as well. I will see you again very, very soon. Goodbye.